globally, there are about 27,000 universities in the world. Most people have only heard of a small fraction of them, but the majority of people are going to, one of the bottom 26,000 universities. And the overall student population is about 207 million students, but that's going to be maybe 350 or 380 million students by 2030. So the kind of marginal growth is like 25,000 students per day joining the university population.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. 20-Minute Leaders is a proud supporter of Make-A-Wish Israel and Tech to Peace, and is in proud collaboration with Secret Chord Ventures, J Ventures, Riverside FM, Fusion VC, Birthright Excel, J Impact, Leap, Google for Startups, and Hippo, and in media partnership with CTech. Welcome to a special episode on 20-Minute Leaders. We're talking about higher education. This whole show is about sort of education, but this is about higher education. And how do we take the world we live in today, we take the needs of students around the world, the emerging needs, and how do we have them intersect into a way that anybody who wants to acquire higher education has access to it with accreditation. Meet Dr. Joshua Broggi, the founder and CEO of Woolf, a platform that makes it possible for companies and academic groups to launch branded degree programs with the same accreditation as major universities in weeks, not years. He was previously a member of the Faculty of Philosophy at Oxford and a member of the governing congregation of the university. He also held a Humboldt Fellowship, during which he worked the role of modern universities in support human progress. Joshua Broggi, welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Michael. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on.
No, thank you very much for coming here. You're doing such awesome work with Woolf University, coming from higher education yourself, being in the faculty philosophy within Oxford and a variety of different interesting positions, and now rethinking a little bit about higher education and taking it to the entrepreneurial world, calling in from Mountain View, the heart of tech. So tell me a little bit about, Josh, your own background and your passion for higher education. What does that even mean to you? How'd you get into this place?
Yeah. So I'm from America, the New England area originally, been living in the UK and Germany for most of the last 10 or 15 years. I was an academic before getting into tech. And so I was on faculty at Oxford, and, I started Woolf with colleagues from Oxford in 2018. The goal was to make world-class higher education more accessible and available, and to ensure the credits were transferable. My impression working at Oxford was that we could start a new Oxford college, every couple of months and fill it with high-quality faculty and students. But that would have taken a very long time. And so we ended up, deciding to start a new collegiate university, which is kind of like the University of California system or the University of London system. It's composed of colleges which are themselves kind of independently governed, but fall within the accreditation system. So if you go to a University of California college like Berkeley, you get a degree from the University of California. And if you go to a college at Woolf, it's independently managed, but it falls within the same quality assurance system, and you get a degree from Woolf and has the college named on it.
Mm-hmm. But I think one of the issues is scale, right? So what is the issue of scale within higher education systems, and how you're actually going about tackling that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Globally, there are about 27,000 universities in the world. Most people have only heard of a small fraction of them, but the majority of people are going to, one of the bottom 26,000 universities. And the overall student population is about 207 million students, but that's going to be maybe 350 or 380 million students by 2030. So the kind of marginal growth is like 25,000 students per day joining the university population. It's like, wow, we need to create roughly 3 average sized universities every day for the next decade, just to be able to service. It's 18-year-olds in economies where the middle class is really developing, really have the first chance to go to university. So it's a huge impact.
Mm-hmm. And so, tell me a little bit about Woolf University, sort of the intersection of tech, higher education, how you're building this out as a sort of as a startup or as a company. How does this even work? It's even weird saying
Yeah.
startup and higher education in the same sentence.
Yeah. It's a great point. So, we're the first we're the first global collegiate university to allow qualified education organizations to join as member colleges and issue accredited degrees. So it'd be like if the University of London went to a boot camp, or the University of California went to a small college in South America and said, hey, you can join the UC system. You can join the University of London system, as long as you meet our criteria. And so we are growing by about one new college every month, and we use software to track all the educational activities in that college. And so the tech part of us as a company is we have a learning platform and an accreditation management platform that tracks everything related to quality assurance and compliance for regulators. The kind of end result is we have 3 levels as an organization. There are all these colleges where we have colleges joining us from all over the world. And then we have software that's tracking their activities. And then we have a legal and regulatory layer, which is a set of licenses where we're actually able to issue degrees that are recognized by governments. So some college in Nigeria does something in our software which matches a license that we have, and then poof, it's an accredited college offering an accredited degree, and it falls within our system. So it's the first kind of organization that's like that, and allows us to move really fast without cutting any corners or lowering standards.
So essentially, it sounds like you're allowing already institutions in place that are already having great faculty, great students, except that they may meet the criteria. They may need to budge a little bit to meet the criteria, but you're offering through software the ability to do sort of this regulation piece at a higher paced rate. If previously somebody needed to go travel their back and forth meetings, spend lots of time, lots of paperwork, now you're saying we've taken a lot of this knowledge and pipeline work, we've put it into a software solution so that we can, leveraging your data and your ongoing behavior, we can potentially give you accreditation types, mechanisms within a few weeks.
Yeah, that's right. So like the amount of work that goes into accreditation is kind of roughly comparable to getting a banking license. And so the idea that every education organization in the world needs to get their own unique license in order to operate is just a huge lift. It really slows down the process, and it's a very paper-based process. And so it's the reason why, most education organizations launch new degree programs every 3 to 5 or 8 years. And we're living in a world where the speed just needs to be a lot higher. Software products are, launching new versions every couple of weeks. And so if we live in a world where we roughly need 3 new universities every day, it's millions of dollars, 3 to 7 years in any country to kind of get a university license. Then if you want to launch a new program, it's a big process. And so being able to compress those timelines is exciting because it means that you can give students, something that's more relevant, and you can iterate more quickly through cycles of education and degree programs without lowering standards. So like ultimately, the reason you have accreditation is you want to be able to guarantee students that they're getting a high quality program.
Is there any pushback from regulators on this? Because essentially you're taking something that's quite sensitive, right? I mean, there's a lot of pride there, sensitive. And you're essentially saying we're automating pieces of it. And historically, anytime you're trying to automate some human behavior, some paperwork, you get some pushback.
That's right. So, accreditation is probably not going to go away anytime soon through pure automation. It's embedded in the visa systems and the tax laws and the migration patterns and the right to operate in countries all over the world. But there is a huge amount of paperwork that goes into it. And so there are parts of it that software can automate. And then there are parts of it where we have a human in the loop. So you might gather a lot of data in real time and then set up literally a committee within a university that has the approval rights about what to do with that data. So it's like, did this program meet all of the quantifiable standards and metrics, yes or no? And you can use software pretty well for that. And then did it meet certain qualitative factors? And then you send it to the committee and they have to vote on it in software. Now, that process would take years normally to gather all the information on spreadsheets and email and so on. We can do it in real time. So ultimately, the thing that regulators get excited about when they look at our work is they can actually get a more granular picture of what's happening in our organization than they can in a normal university. And it's kind of 24/7, right? So it's not like an audit every 5 years. You could log in at any time and see exactly what's happening down to the level of like what, you know, assignments are being given to students and what PDFs are they reading and are they academic peer-reviewed literature published in the last 5 years and all these kind of very small benchmarks that typically are discovered through an audit process in retrospect are happening with us in real time.
Mm-hmm. Take me back to sort of the beginning of this. Were you always interested in scaling higher education and accessibility, or is this something that you sort of stumbled upon and became excited about?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think being able to give students access to just a fantastic educational experience is something that I'm naturally passionate about. Is one of the reasons I got into higher education and became a professor, a teacher. I think you also begin to see the challenges firsthand. So if you're lecturing in a classroom, it's really common in the United States or the UK that the students are going into debt, and higher education is expensive, even in countries where students don't pay very much money for it. The taxpayers are paying for it. So it's like Germany, where I was also a lecturer. It's 300 euros a year to go to university, but the taxpayer is supplementing that with 15 to 30,000 euros per student. So it's a costly endeavor. I think the challenge is when you have students at one end of the classroom going into debt and the teacher at the other end of the classroom not earning very much. And then you wonder where all the money is disappearing. So if there's 100,000 euros worth of students in the room and the teacher's getting paid 3,000 or 4,000 euros, where's the other 96% going? And it's disappearing into a bureaucratic machinery where the majority of staff at a university are admin and compliance. They're not lecturers; they're administrators, and so that's a system that students are ultimately paying for, and the taxpayers are paying for. And so I think we can be more efficient in how we do that, and ultimately students will get a better education for it.
Mm-hmm. And for you to get to those realizations, sort of walk me through a little bit about the ideation process that you've went through, figuring out, okay, there's actually an obvious pain point, but there's actually a tangible solution that we can provide.
Yeah. So, at one point I was really interested in starting a new college at Oxford and started doing the legwork on that when I was on faculty and I was on the governing parliament of the university, the congregation. And so started, laying down the groundwork for starting a new Oxford college and realized, okay, this is going to take 5 or 8 years. And at the end of it, we're going to have one college. And really, we need one college every month. Not just one college over the course of my career. We really need to be able to expand what we're doing in a new way, given the student numbers in the world. So I thought it would be possible to have a much bigger impact by using software to automate some of those processes and kind of taking the cap off of growth without sacrificing quality. But,
Interesting.
There are a lot of students in the world who are, for the first time, learning things at the university level. It's a very different world that we live in today than it was, say, 50 years ago in terms of student numbers coming in from developing countries that now have huge middle classes that are moving into technology and white-collar jobs for the first time.
Circling back a little bit to sort of the software here and the technology that empowers this, I'd love to get a little bit of a better sense as to sort of the technological side of how you're pushing the boundaries of how we think through accreditation system or regulation through software. So you mentioned a little bit through some of the tracking, some of the KPIs that I guess the regulators have seen. What is sort of the technology behind what you're doing here?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. There are two ways that organizations become accredited. First, there's something that happens at the organizational level, and then there's something that happens at the program level. And so both of those have to be tracked with technology. And generally, we are interested in building an auditable record, which is kind of app-end only, of exactly what's happening inside an organization as it moves through a series of processes against some set of KPIs. And so at the organizational level, they have to set up certain committees and they have to form certain boards, and only people with the right access controls can be members of those committees. So they have to have their education background verified, and only people with PhDs can be on certain committees, or only people with master's degrees can be on other committees. And so all of the people in those profiles have to get aligned with the different kind of role-based access control groups. At the program level, there are a lot more granular pieces that have to be tracked related to regulation. We don't get to decide many of the regulatory points. Those get decided by government partners of ours. And so the government partner might say it's 25 hours of student labor for every credit. And then we have to find a way to justify what 25 hours looks like in a degree program in terms of study and workload for students. And so then the job is to say, hey, as a course creator, I'm going to, designate this assignment as like a 5-hour long assignment or a 25-hour long assignment or whatever.
Interesting. So are we transitioning, if we're looking at the, a little bit down the line, future of higher education? Is it, how do you think through about this standardization of higher education, especially as, ideas are changing. I'm personally invested in a few startups that are looking at skills-based learning, in response to higher education. You're playing in both of those worlds. How are you seeing higher education in the future from, I guess, a standardization point of view, a relevancy point of view for the extra 25,000 students a day type of problem?
Yeah. So there are a few different moving parts. One is the old way of measuring things was pretty simplistic, like how many hours are you sitting in a chair? And that's clearly not a great measure of whether or not somebody has learned something and whether or not they're capable of doing something. And so ultimately, you've got to be able to show that somebody's got a competency in some domain. But you also need to be able to communicate across cultural boundaries. And so if somebody calls their kind of weekend programming course Masters in AI, you're probably not at the same level of like mastery as if you do a sort of American or European master's degree, which is 2,250 hours exactly, right? And so if like you go to Stanford, you get a master's degree, it's 2,250 hours. That gets expressed as 45 credits. You go to Europe and you do a master's degree, it's 2,250 hours. It's expressed as 90 credits. And so you need some like translation between systems to be able to know the difference between 45 American credits and 90 European credits. But at the same time, like just sitting in a chair for 2,000 hours is not going to make you really good at managing artificial intelligence. So getting the balance there, I think is really important. Increasingly, skills matter a lot. But what we typically see is with organizations that come to us, if they've asked a student to study for a year or 2 years in their boot camp, like it gets really hard to express that to an employer if you don't have a master's degree. And if you're explaining, you're kind of losing. And so it's like, no, I promise this program was really more substantive than other programs. Whereas there's just like no explanation to do if you can just say, oh, I have a European master's degree that I received from this. And then people understand what it is. And, the employer has a shorthand way of understanding exactly what happened.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. And so the vision here with Woolf University, where do you see this, long term? Obviously, short term, you're growing, you're scaling. What is sort of the goal or the win of Woolf University?
Yeah. So I think we're building the largest collegiate university in the world. And, right now it's a relatively simple thing where people plug into our software and they're able to prove to our regulatory partners that they meet all of the quality assurance standards set out by those government officials. And so you effectively plug in and very rapidly are able to demonstrate that you meet and maintain compliance for accreditation. And so plug in, get accredited. But we're layering in more of the back office services that you would find in a large university when it comes to research resources and things like that. And so as we scale the number of colleges across our system, students get access to more scholarships and more financing options. They get access to interesting benefits that come from other colleges. And we really want to get to a place where you can kind of go to any city in the world and there are multiple Woolf colleges that are there. And that's a really exciting prospect. We were recently in Mexico City, and I think there were 2 Woolf colleges and a third Woolf college getting started. And, then there are opportunities for meetups and new kind of social dynamics from the community that emerge from that.
Interesting. And so do you see yourself staying in the realm of sort of providing that extra layer of accreditation or that the standardization for these colleges, or do you see yourself also getting involved with the actual education system and different engagements with students or networks, marketplaces, etc.?
Yeah. So I'd like to think that accreditation would just kind of go away and that what you'd really end up with is proof around skills or something like that. I don't think that will happen. I think it's way too deeply embedded in the way governments work. But I think we have the proof around student skills, and that's a huge unlock for employment partners. And so for us to be able to then partner with employers and being able to say, hey, look, this is a really good student that can match your needs, I think that's quite exciting. I think we won't teach at Woolf. So our colleges teach, and it's like the University of California doesn't teach anything. Berkeley teaches something, and UCLA teaches something, and so like the colleges provide the teaching. Or University of London doesn't have faculty. KCL London has faculty, and in virtue of being in KCL, you're faculty of the whole university. So like we won't teach, we won't have students, we won't have faculty. But we can provide white label course content, really high quality kind of libraries of books and videos and things like that to our colleges. And so we can kind of improve their resources. But I don't think that we'll end up teaching. I don't think we'll be able to totally overcome government restrictions, but we can reduce the friction. So we've built like the only credit exchange system between borders that I know of, at least. And so you can easily stack credits across our system natively.
That's very, very cool. I love the way that you're coming from the system, you're identifying the pain point, you're understanding technology and coming in with fresh eyes and understanding that you can sort of create this, reduce that friction, between borders and it's, from somebody from the outside, it sounds like such a complicated world that's so regulated and so heavy, yet you're coming and you're actually doing it. You're building, the world's largest, standardized accreditation system, allowing colleges to participate in it, and at the end, creating a very positive impact on students. And that's obviously the end goal here. So, Joshua, thank you so much for coming here and sharing with me. 20 minutes is not nearly enough for me to understand everything that you're doing, but it is enough for me to want to dive into it myself and to get inspired by it. So, thank you, and best of luck with Woolf University, and stay safe and stay healthy.
Many thanks, Michael. It's a real pleasure. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye, Josh.